If you'll take a look in your bulletin, you'll find a yellow sheet that includes our scripture lesson for today. It is taken from selected verses in chapters 7 and 11 of the book of Ecclesiastes. And I'll read through it with you, and then I'll ask if you just kind of keep it nearby, because we will refer to it a couple of times during the message this morning. Solomon, or the teacher, writes, "A good reputation is more valuable than costly perfume, and the day you die is better than the day you were born. Better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies, so the living should take this to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for sadness has a refining influence on us. A wise person thinks a lot about death, while a fool thinks only about having a good time. Better to be criticized by a wise person than to be praised by a fool. A fool's laughter is quickly gone, like thorns crackling in fire. This also is meaningless. Extortion turns wise people into fools, and bribes corrupt the heart. Finishing is better than starting. Patience is better than pride. Control your temper, for anger labels you a fool. Don't long for the good old days. This is not wise. Wisdom is even better when you have money, for both are a benefit as you go through life. Wisdom and money can get you almost anything, but only wisdom, can save your life. Accept the way God does things, for who can straighten what he has made crooked? Enjoy prosperity while you can, but when hard times strike, realize that both come from God. Remember that nothing is certain in this life. I've always tried my best to let wisdom guide my thoughts and actions. I've said to myself, I am determined to be wise, but it didn't work. For wisdom is always distant and difficult to find. Send your grain across the seas, and in time profits will flow back to you. But divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risks might lie ahead. When clouds are heavy, the rains come down. Whether a tree falls north or south, it stays where it falls. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. Just as you cannot understand the path of the wind or the mystery of a tiny baby growing in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activity of God, who does all things. Plant your seed in the morning and keep busy all afternoon, for you don't know if profit will come from one activity or another, or maybe both." Amen. Well, last week, we saw Solomon dismantle almost everything that you and I strive for and trust in to bring us happiness and to give us a sense of worth. We saw him pursue wisdom and pleasure and possessions and power and success, and discovered that, sadly, none of them could provide the lasting satisfaction that he was searching for. He found that all of those pursuits became meaningless when he viewed them through the lens of death, because, as you will recall, death becomes the great equalizer. The rich and powerful die, but so do the poor and the vulnerable. So here we are in week 3 of this 4-week series, and Solomon is still talking about death. That's really morbid, isn't it? But you see, in reality, Solomon isn't fascinating with dying. Solomon is fascinating with living. He's convinced that if we let it, that our mortality becomes the great teacher that God has provided us, the teacher that will show us how we can live life wisely. And so this morning, I'd like for us to try to answer this question. What does a wise person actually look like? How does a wise person actually act? Well, one of the first things we can learn from our scripture this morning is that a wise person learns from death. Solomon says a good reputation is more valuable than costly perfume, and the day you die is better than the day you were born. It's better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. And a wise person thinks a lot about death, verse 4, while a fool thinks only about having a good time. Now, I know that that sounds really awful, but the teacher, Solomon, is making a really good point. The day that I die becomes a better teacher than the day that I am born. Not necessarily for me, right, because I'm dead, but there really isn't much that we can say about a newborn, right, other than, oh, isn't he cute? Or, I'm glad she slept the whole night through, or, I think he has his father's eyes. But what can we say about the person on the day of their death? What can we learn from the dearly departed? Now, I have to tell you that in the short while that I've been here serving as your pastor, it's been my privilege to officiate services of various sorts for Wayne Coble, for Mary Eberhardt, for Ruth Cunningham, June Elder, and yesterday for June Nagel. And every one of those services was unique. But every one of those services also had something in common. Every one of those services included individuals who stood up to testify about how the one who had departed had not only reflected the love of Christ in their lives, but had also impacted their families and their friends and their communities. In fact, my own father passed away 5 years ago now. He loved to travel and to hunt and to listen to the pirates on the radio while he stripped copper wire in his basement at night in the cold of the winter. But those weren't the things that others remembered him for. They remembered for how he poured his life into young people and how he enjoyed scouting and how he lived life to the fullest. You see, the day of our death is a better teacher than the day of our birth, because a coffin is a better preacher than a crib. As Solomon says, it's better to spend our time in funerals because, after all, everyone dies. So the living should take this to heart. A wise person will ask themselves, when it's my turn, what will my life have been worth? When it's my turn, what will people be saying about me? Instead of being superficial, death invites you and me to be people of depth. And Ecclesiastes invites us to recognize that living a good life means that we need to be prepared to die a good death. For death teaches us something that birth never can. It reminds us that one day somebody is going to summarize your life and my life in just a minute or two. So perhaps the most important question we should ask ourselves, the question that I put before the congregation at Ruth's celebration yesterday was, not how long do you think you're going to live, but what kind of life do you think you will have lived? Death is a teacher. That's the first thing that a wise person understands. The second thing that a wise person understands is this, that wisdom itself has its limitations. If you look at verses 23 and 24, in your handout it says, I've always tried my best to let wisdom guide my thoughts and actions. I said to myself, I'm determined to be wise, but it didn't work, because wisdom is always distant and difficult to find. Try as he might, Solomon tried to use wisdom to find the answer to happiness. And yes, indeed, wisdom has its benefits, doesn't it? But if we look back at verse 13, we see that wisdom has limits. He says, for example, accept the way God does things, for who can straighten what God has made crooked? No matter how wise we are, we can't fix something that God has intended to be twisted. For example, can you and I explain why floods come when all we need is a gentle rain? Can you or I tell us why a godly person's business seems to fail when someone who is seemingly wicked seems to prosper? We can ask God these things. Heaven knows Job did. But the truth is we just don't know the answers. And we're not meant to, as I said with the children today. The God who controls the universe knows best. He knows the answers to everything. His ways are not our ways. You see, conventional wisdom tells us that we should begin with what we know for certain and apply that to the things that we don't yet understand. Science does that all the time, does it not? But in this writing, Solomon turns that logic on his head. He says that we should start with what we don't know and apply that to how we should live our lives as wise persons. In other words, the uncertainties of life are meant to shape our understanding of what we think to be certain. Now that may be the most surprising sentence that I have in my entire message today, that the uncertainties of life are meant to shape the things that we think are certain. But if we dive into it a little bit, I think you'll understand where I'm coming from. If you draw a little bit with me from Ecclesiastes chapter 11 there, verses 1 through 6, I'd like to point out three things that we do know. Three things that a wise living life teaches us. First of all, I got that wrong. I wanted to talk to you about things that we don't know. I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Let's start with what we don't know. First of all, we don't know how to predict the future. We proved that this morning, didn't we? We don't know what the future holds, and yet we live our lives as though we do. For example, how many of you have already made plans for next week? How many of you have scheduled appointments for next month? How many of you may have already made your deposit for next summer's vacation? Do we ever think about the fact that none of those things may ever happen? Would it make a difference in the way we live our lives if we realized that it may not happen? We also don't know how to do the things that only God can do. We don't know how to do things that only God can do. I can't make it rain. I can't tell the wind which direction to go. God creates. At best, we do our best to manage. Job had been shaking his fist and railing on at length about God and how God had been unfair to him, and if he had the opportunity that he would interrogate God. Well, finally God shows up in the book of Job, and instead, Job is the one who's being interrogated. And God says, and understand that taking a little bit of poetic license, God says, "Have you commanded the morning since your days began? Have you caused the dawn to know its place? Where is the way of dwelling for light? And where is the place of darkness, that you may take it to its territory and discern its paths? Can you send forth the lightning, that it may go and say to it, here we are?" The answer, of course, is rhetorical. No, I can't, of course. And as believers on this side of eternity, we should take comfort in knowing that we do not know the answers to everything, but that God does, and that we can trust Him and rely upon Him. Because we cannot know and we don't need to know. In fact, trying to know or pretending that we know is foolishness, Solomon tells us. It is not wisdom. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know how to do the things that only God knows how to do. We also don't know how to guarantee success. Now, I have to tell you that I want to be successful in my life. I've always wanted to be successful in my life. I can't imagine that any of you sitting out there would say, well, honestly, my goal in life is to be another failure. I don't think that's true. But in reality, we don't know for sure whether or not we will fail or succeed. Solomon uses good logic when he says, divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risks might lie ahead. Tom Myers is out here as an investment person. He probably would have taught you that your investments, like your manure, should be spread across the field. If you put it all in one place, it just tends to stink. We didn't know what would rise and what would fall, so we would always be careful in the way that we handled our investments. That's a prudent way to go because we do not know where success will be found. Solomon learned these things. He learned the things that he could not know through wisdom. And he said that we should then let those limitations frame our perspective on how we should live our lives wisely. Know what you don't know, and let it help to frame what you think you know for certain. Like this. Wise living means that we shouldn't cling to life and its possessions. Wise living means that we shouldn't cling to life and its possessions. One of our greatest mistakes is to think that our life or our wealth or the things that we have are with us forever. For example, you may remember Jesus telling a parable about a rich man who had a fertile field. He produced all kinds of crops, more crops than he could put into his barns, and so he said, well, what should I do about that? He said, I know. I'll tear down my existing barns, I'll build bigger barns, and then I'll have all kinds of room for all of this surplus, and then I'll be able to live fat, dumb, and happy for many years to come. And then God approached him and said, you silly person, Tonight I'm calling you home. Tonight you're going to die. What are you going to do with all of those things that you worked so hard to accumulate? And he closes by saying, yes, a person is a fool if they store up earthly wealth, but do not have a rich relationship with God. What good is all our work on this life if in the end we die? One commentator said what we should do is take the best of what we have and the best of what we are and give it away. Hold out our hands openly before God and others and say, here it is, Lord. All that I have and all that I am is yours. Do with it as you will. For I know that you know what is best for me. Biblical wisdom says we should open wide the windows and doors of our homes, that we should open wide the windows and doors of our churches, that we should be, as Christians, much poorer than we would be otherwise, so that others may benefit from what God has given us as a blessing. Christ-like wisdom should shape our beliefs and our actions, so that we live in a world pouring ourselves out to it, rather than avoiding death by retreating from it. We should not hold on to things. Wise living also means that neither success nor failure is the end. What does he tell us in verse 3 of chapter 11? He says, when clouds are heavy, the rains come down. Whether a tree falls to the south or the north, that's where it remains. Interesting. Certain things are inevitable. They're going to happen no matter how hard we work at them. We've already proven that we can't guarantee success, nor can we necessarily guarantee failure. I think that the teacher is telling us, though, that if we live a life that says that our meaning is all bound up in whether or not we succeed or not, that's really no life at all. And if our life is built with such insulation around it to protect us from ever failing, that's no life at all either, because we become a slave either to our success or our avoidance of failure. We seek to insulate ourselves from all risk. We'll never experience the joy of living that God has given us. And that leads me to the third point, that a wise life is one that finds joy in life itself as its own reward. Solomon believes that life's reward is not found in what all we pursue, but in the pursuit itself. It's not in what we pursue, but it's in the pursuit itself. The real gift is found in the life that we receive from our Maker. And so he says, when it comes to money, extortion turns wise people into fools and bribes corrupt the heart. So we need to ask ourselves, how much is enough? What good is it if I sell my soul to receive all of these extra things? Am I going to line my coffin with it? As some say, a hearse doesn't come with a trailer hitch so that you can put a U-Haul on it for all the things that you've accumulated. When it comes to patience, Solomon writes, finishing is better than starting, and patience is better than pride. We need to understand that anything worthwhile will take time. And even if it doesn't fit into the schedule that we have predetermined for it, enjoy the journey. Give it the time that it needs to flower. For patience is indeed a virtue. When it comes to anger, control your temper. For anger labels you a fool. There was a period in my life where I was known for having a short fuse. I became unapproachable to people. And that limited my ability to work with others. And I had to pray through that and work through that, and God has changed me. And now my fuse is much longer. I can't necessarily say that it's all that pretty when it finally runs out, but it's much, much longer than it used to be. When it comes to nostalgia, what does Solomon tell us? Verse 10, don't long for the good old days. This is not wise. And I'll admit to you that as I get older, this becomes more and more my Achilles heel. I find myself looking back on earlier days with longing, maybe hoping that I could have those back again. But you know, Perhaps it's like childbirth for women, I'm told, because I've never given birth myself, that we remember all the beautiful things and forget the pain and suffering that came along with it. We tend to remember the good things in life when we look back. We forget the rough times, don't we? Sometimes the past isn't all that we thought it was. But Solomon's point is this: live life today. Enjoy life today. Be thankful for the fact that you put your feet back on the floor in the morning. Be thankful for the first cup of coffee if that's what you enjoy. Be thankful that you can close your eyes at night and thank God that you've been able to put forth a good day. Eugene O'Kelly figured that out. Eugene O'Kelly, you probably don't know. There's a book about him that was given to me by a friend. It's called Chasing Daylight, and if after I talk about him for a moment you'd like to borrow it, you may. It's an easy read. Eugene O'Kelly was 53 years old, and he was chairman of the board and chief executive officer of one of the largest accounting firms in the world. And in May of 2005, he was diagnosed with late-stage brain cancer. He was told he had 3 to 6 months to live. That diagnosis changed everything. He resigned his position immediately, and he concentrated the rest of his life, which turned out to be just under 4 months, spending time on experiences and relationships. He made a list of people that he needed to see, of fences that he needed to mend, of places he needed to go, letters he needed to write, whatever was necessary, and he was focused like a laser beam on doing as much of that as he could before he finished. Sadly, or maybe appropriately, the last chapter of this book is written by his wife, because he passed before he had completed it. But his perspective changed when he saw his life from the perspective of his death. What might you or I do differently today, tomorrow, or this week if you were to receive the same diagnosis that Eugene O'Kelly did? For you see, tomorrow is not promised. Death is coming. So you and I need to find enjoyment in the work that we do. We need to relish the friendships that we have. We need to enjoy the meal that we're about to sit down to at lunch today. We need to live our bucket list instead of building a longer and longer to-do list. Because we all have those, don't we? Clean the house, take the kids to school, get the oil changed in the car, start holiday shopping, even though that sounds like a dirty word at this point. But do we have a list of things undone, or words unsaid, or relationships that have yet to be mended? If not, why not? And if yes, why haven't we taken to working on those with a sense of urgency? Are we afraid that we won't complete them? Or are we afraid that we will fail at trying to complete them? So, what does a wise person really look like? Well, certainly not someone who knows everything, or can control everything, or who can succeed at everything. A wise person understands that life is fragile, that it's elusive, we can't hold on to it tightly, that tomorrow is not guaranteed, that many questions that we have in life will remain unanswered. And yet, the wise person chooses to live life faithfully anyhow. So, let me leave you with this thought. Don't wait until the perfect time. Don't wait until you have every answer or until every perceived risk disappears. Live life faithfully. Love others deeply. Serve them generously. But do it today. Because today is the gift from God. It is the one that we are given. It is the one that He expects us to enjoy.